Hey there everyone, welcome back to the Game Vault. I'm Captain Beefy, and we're going to talk about Alan Wake Remastered, the game that came out October of 2021, if memory serves me correctly, with Alan Wake 2 coming out later this year. This is a game I missed. I never got to play it, and I was like, you know what, let me go back, give this game a try, and see what it's all about. So, let's talk about it, but first up, let's cue the music. Alright, well, before we get started, let me know what you thought of Alan Wake. Did you play the original game, or did you play the remaster, and how much did you enjoy it? I'd be curious to hear your opinions down below so we can talk about it a little bit. Now, me, I really enjoyed certain aspects of this game, and I mean really enjoyed them. And there are other aspects I found a little wanting, you know. We'll start off with the really, really good stuff. First off, the story was fantastic. It was convoluted. It's hard to understand. It's divided into 6 chapters, and then they had, I guess, 2 DLC afterward, giving it a total of 8 chapters. So you got, you know, the 2 separate DLCs were added after the main game. If you just played the main game, the way it ended was very dark, you know. And there are going to be spoilers in this, so if you haven't played yet or you don't want any spoilers, then you might want to check back later on. But yeah, I found this game to be very dark, very disturbing, and as far as horror games go, I enjoyed it immensely because it's so unique, right? A lot of games rely on the visceral blood and guts. Games like Dead Space, for instance, you know, Dead Island. Yeah, it's another bloody game. I wouldn't call that one horror. Well, yeah, it's horror, but it's very comedic as well. You know, Resident Evil's a little different, but it's still pretty bloody, and there's some really disturbing, painful imagery in there, and you know, some crazy moments. So yeah, in Alan Wake is mostly blood free. I mean, yeah, I don't really remember seeing any blood. So to sum up the story a little bit, you play as the title character, Alan Wake, and Alan and his wife Alice had gone to a mining town called Bright Falls in Washington State to kind of get away from it all. And a tragedy happened, and Alice either died or disappeared, and it's hard to determine that until you get through the whole story. And the story follows Alan as he tries to figure out what exactly happened to Alice. Where is she? Was she taken? Did she die? He lost a week of his life where he kind of blacked out when he heard her screaming and went to look for her. And it's, like I said, it's a very convoluted story. It jumps from the Bright Falls back to their city, you know, their home in New York City, back and forth. It jumps the timeline of a week or so, and then a couple years here and there. It's just really wonky how this game plays through. It's not done in a linear fashion with time, and I think that adds a little bit to the confusion. I mean, but it's a fantastic method to tell the story, you know, because things happen and blah blah blah, and you get little references that you hear, and then later on when you flashback, you're like, oh, okay, I see what we're talking about now. You know, graphically, it's a remaster of the original game, which came out, I want to say 2010, 2011, something like that. I think it was a PS3 era game, if memory serves me. You know, so they did do the graphical upgrades. The game looks good. You know, the characters look good. The scenes are great. You know, the assets look fine. But they are definitely a product of their time. And even though they've been remastered, you can still feel their age a little bit. I think the voice acting is, for the most part, spot on. Many of the characters are, especially the title character, Alan Wake, is fantastic. Alice is great. Alan's best friend, Barry, he's great. A lot of the members of Bright Falls are, everybody's believable. Nobody sounds like, they're reading off of cue cards, or that they're just getting out of acting school and, getting their chops here with Alan Wake. So, yeah. So graphically, it looks good, but again, it's a product of the time. It wouldn't stand up to today's standards if it was released, but it is what it is. And maybe as an independent game it would. It really isn't that horrible. Now, a lot of the game is about you going from place to place and learning bits and pieces of information, trying to piece together this mystery of what's going on in Bright Falls, right? So you're traveling from place to place. You do this mainly on foot. Occasionally you get a hold of a vehicle, and sometimes you ride a lift of some sort, like a gondola a couple times, elevators here and there. But there's a lot of traversal, and it's very much part walking simulator, as those games like to be called, or people like to call those games. There's a little bit of puzzle solving here and there, but nothing really brain breaking. You're not having to move stuff around, put stuff on pedestals, anything like that. It's mainly, it's pretty straightforward, the story. And so not a lot of that. There is combat involved, and as a character, you're a writer, so you're not a soldier. You don't have magnificent weapons and all that, and the weapons you get are limited. Ammo's limited. Your two main weapons in the game are a flashlight and a revolver. Those are the ones you have in your hands more than anything else. The flashlight has a couple levels to it, like you can trade it for a upgraded flashlight, and then like a lantern, they call it, or something like that, one of those big fat flashlights, and then an upgraded version of that. You can get pistols, a couple different kinds of shotguns, a rifle, a flare gun, some flares, and flashbang grenades. So what are you fighting in Alan Wake? So you're fighting these weird guys, people, humans, that seem to come out of this darkness that is enveloping Bright Falls, right? So the whole town is like wrapped in this darkness, and somehow this darkness is connected to you. And so it will conjure these things out of thin air. And your enemies are not clearly defined. They're mainly dark. When they get a little closer, you beam your flashlight on them. You can see their details a little bit, but they all look like just dudes, dudes from the town, mining town. Look like guys that drive trucks and work in gas stations, that cut their own firewood. Look like guys that work at the hardware store. These are good old boys that you're fighting, and they got good old boy weapons for the most part, and occasionally you get the obligatory guy with a chainsaw. So thank you, Resident Evil 4, for putting that in everyone's head. So that's your combat is against these guys, and the enemy variation is not there. There's not a lot. You'll face different amounts of these guys. In the beginning it's one, and then it's a couple, two or three, and in the end you're getting waves of them sometimes, and you're just having to fight through it using only a flashlight that can and will run out of battery. You can fill it. You can carry batteries with you. You're working with a gun that you can only carry limited ammo for, or maybe if you're lucky you have a couple flares and a flare gun as well, or a flashbang. And then you have the shotgun or the rifle with you. Who knows? But you're always kind of scrimping for ammunition and batteries, to the point sometimes where I didn't want to slap a new battery in, because your flashlight will recharge on its own, so you don't have to fully recharge it if you just let it go. But that doesn't behoove you. That doesn't do you any good in battle when you need to you use the flashlight basically to burn the darkness off the enemy, and when that darkness is burned off, he's vulnerable, and you can pop a couple bullets in him and kill him, but he doesn't drop dead. He just disappears into the darkness again. So it's very weird. It's very surreal. There's a lot of crazy moments in there. There are some occasional instances where you can use the environment in combat, and I see that a lot more in the 2 DLCs than I did in the original game. And, talking about the original game before I got to the DLCs, I found the combat to be probably the weakest part of the game. The controls feel a little clunky. The combat system feels antiquated, old-fashioned, and it is, It definitely is. But it doesn't feel responsive when you try to dodge something. If you try to dodge something, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Every now and then you get a cinematic dodge. More often than not, you just get hit because you didn't do something right and you didn't make the dodge gods happy that day. So that's, the combat, it's very lackluster, and you can feel the age of the game in the combat. Combat in games has come a long way. I'd love to, I think it was like you hit the L1 button and something else, and to dodge, right? Or push, or no. Yeah, I think it was L1, and then you push your stick to the left, and that's a dodge, or something like that. And it would just feel better if you had the opportunity just to, as having that ability bound to one button. Square is dodge, and then use L, or use the left stick to dodge as direction. But like I said, half the time it didn't feel like it worked. It was very janky, very, very janky. The weapon aiming was mediocre at best. You have no melee option, so if the guys get in your face, you can't hit him with the butt of the shotgun in the face and do some damage, maybe knock him back or anything like that. It's very, very simple, the combat, and I do believe that's the weakest part of Alan Wake. But otherwise, I think the story is fantastic. The 2 DLCs that came with the remastered version are well worth playing through. It adds about 2 hours of game time, roughly, to your gaming session. This is a game that, oh god, what did I make? 6 regular episodes. That's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So maybe I have 11 or 12 hours, roughly, in the game to capture the whole game. So it's not a long game. It's a game you can play over a 3-day weekend easily, just dedicating a handful of hours a day to it. And it is a lot of fun. I do highly recommend it for the story alone. If you can get past a little janky, dated combat system, yeah. And I don't like the way, even the way the combat's structured. There's no way to lock onto an enemy. Very often when I would go to beam my flashlight at somebody to weaken them, it would lock onto something else. It wouldn't lock onto what I was trying to aim for. So there is a lock on in the game, but it just doesn't feel like it works properly. Yeah, and a lot of times, it's okay. It's okay. It was serviceable. And another problem I had is very often you get thrown into combat and it's just a slog, just to get through it. You're like, oh, I got to go through 5 waves of these guys. They don't have a lot of bullets. I got to burn through some batteries. And just generally, those were the least fun moments. Whenever I got into combat, I always felt like, all right, I can't wait for this to end so I can go on and solve this mystery. I think the game would have been a little better off with a more refined combat system or less combat situations, or if they used the environment a lot more like they did in the 2 DLCs. I think it would have elevated the game quite a bit. It's kind of cool to, instead of have to rely on your flashlight to blow rocks out of the way like you do in the 2nd DLC, to allow a big beam of light to sweep through and wipe everybody out. That's kind of cool. You got to dodge them and avoid them until you're able to bust that rock, and then boom, everybody's dead. You run past it, you move on to the next section, rinse and repeat. That was a fun area, actually. A lot more fun than just sitting there in combat with guys and, trying not to get hit with a sickle in the head while I'm desperately reloading my pistol, fumbling around, and trying to put a battery in my flashlight at the same time because it's almost out of use. Yeah, it was alright. So overall, it's a positive experience. This game is free right now on PlayStation Plus for the Essentials level, which is the lowest level. So if you have PlayStation Plus, you can go ahead and download this game for free, add it to your library, and keep it for as long as you have PlayStation Plus. So at the price, there's really no reason not to give this game a try, right? I played it on the PS5 and, felt good there. I didn't run into any issues. I never got I don't think I ever got booted out of the game or anything like that. You know, the frame rate seemed consistently pretty good. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I would definitely recommend doing this. I'd give this game probably an 8 out of 10. As a remasters go, it's not the best I've played. They could have done a little bit more, I think, to update the combat like they did when they remade Resident Evil 4. If Resident Evil 4 came back out with the same exact combat it did when it was the original Resident Evil 4, the game would have been a lot less fun. You know, it just would have been a little bit of a drag. There are some certain modern things you can do to combat to dress it up a little bit and make it more interesting and more engaging. So, once again, tell me what you think down below. Did you love this game? Did you hate this game? Are you looking forward to the new Alan Wake 2, which is coming out, I believe, in October this year? Somewhere around there. I know it's in the latter part of the year. Anyways, as always, I'm Captain Beefy. This is the Game Vault. If you haven't done so, please leave a like on the video down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that bell for notifications. I will see you next time. Until then, peace.